themselves in this way?
You're looking for self-care practices working with patients? Yes, thank you. Could you repeat it one more time?
Yes. Is anyone going to compile the best practices or of all the practices that the folks here have mentioned so that it can be shared with everybody?
I see. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? We'll take 5 in a row and then we'll respond to them, not necessarily in order. Hi. Why? Can you repeat it one more time, dear?
Why do sisters and brothers have to pray before they eat?
Why? Okay. Why do sisters and brothers have to pray before they eat? Okay. Thank you, dear brother. Very good question. Thank you. And we have 3 more questions. Mary, do you want to? We have actually a microphone in the back. So if others have a question, we can sort of have you over there.
Dear brothers and sisters, it's been so beneficial and amazing. And sort of just a tag on the end of Kyra's question, I've heard a few different practitioners talk about establishing some connections for mutual support as professionals, for developing practice of mindfulness for ourselves and others. And I'm sure there are ways to do this, but I just thought I'd mention it in this forum since we're all here. So I don't know if any of you have any, am I too soft? Sorry. I don't know if any of you have any interest or ideas in addressing that, but I thought I would mention it's been something that several people have been talking about, including myself. Was that clear?
So you're asking, and it has been some conversation among the retreatants about ways to continue mutual support after the retreat?
Yes, and to sort of share best practices.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sort of tagging on the end of Kyra's question.
Okay. Wonderful. Great.
Dear Sangha, dear brothers and sisters, how can we help teach motivation for self-care?
So we're looking at how to phrase your question the way you were saying it was, how do we teach motivation for self-care? Okay.
Hello, dear Sangha. We have been practicing being mindful of our breath and being mindful in our body. I'm wondering if anyone could speak to how to be mindful at times when it's very difficult to be in your body due to physical suffering or pain.
So the sister was asking how to be mindful at times of physical suffering and pain. And an emotional pain also, dear sister? Yes, an emotional pain as well. And we have okay. We have a friend who is asking a question, which also I think, even though we may not have his particular circumstance, I think we can relate to. I am a freshman in college. How do I find my bliss, and what are some ways I can turn that into right livelihood? And it's signed, "Thank you, Mr. Confused." Thank you, Mr. Confused. I think there's also, enlightenment in that question, so I'm not sure if that's an accurate name, but. So I think we have our questions to start with, and we have a couple of mics up here so that the panel can respond to whatever question they might like. Dear David, would you please also number on the sides of the questions so we'll know which ones we're responding to? Thank you. So I have a suggestion for maybe at least the second question, maybe the first. If there is an interest in people, continuing after this, there may be a way that you might want to share emails and be able to set up a freeconferencecall.com or a Yahoo group or a Google group. And that is also a way to begin to share practices. And that is something that sanghas do, when they're having ways of continuing to communicate. And freeconferencecall.com can have up to 90 callers from all across the country for free. And it's just whatever the cost is to that particular phone number, which is maybe a long distance call. So I would suggest those kinds of things. We're hoping that there can be some self-organizing energy, and if need be, we might be able to, help to support putting out other information to other folks at a different time. That's great. Mary has a pad and paper and a pen, and she's passing it around. So if people are interested in being a part of this group to share practices as well as be in this sort of, at this moment, not sure whether it's going to be a Yahoo group, a Google group, or a free conference call group, but you will get an email regarding that. I'm sensing Mary's going to be our point person on this to start, and there'll be some second bodies, I think, that will be stepping up as well. and not after. We'll be doing the pad with the emails. It'll be available after the Q&A.
So, dear Thầy, dear Sangha, I think everybody very polite. Maybe pick up the most difficult question for later. I suggest maybe I try to answer question number 2. Is why do we pray before we eat? I think this is in most of the, if all the spiritual tradition is to have gratitude for the food we have and to be fully present for the food. We have a couple deer that hang around the property, and you can see the deer almost try to find something to eat every time they get the chance. And we human used to live in those conditions. When we have to go after the food somewhere, we don't know how to do agriculture, and we have minimum place to stay, like sometime in a cave or something, and we didn't know how to build a hut or something like that. So deep down inside our consciousness, there is a craving, a worry about not having enough food. And it's justified because the deer don't have a blanket, don't have a sleeping bag. And the winter comes, so they need to gather as much food and energy as possible to withstand the winter. We become a lot better now. We have housing, we have winter coat and things like that. But then it's always good to go back to the conditions that we are always lucky to have a lot of food, that to able to not to worry about being hungry. I remember I was a boat people, and we stayed in a boat for 7 days, and we ran out of food. So for 3 days we didn't have anything to eat. And there was a lot of people on the boat. There was like 1,000 people in the boat. So it's kind of hard to, whenever we have some supply ship that come and give us food, we share. But if not, we just have to wait. We know the boat is going to arrive at destination, the camp. And then I stay in the camp for about a month. And we stay in the big tent. We beg for food. We stay in line in the like a military mass tent. So sometimes it's good to go back to our humble origin and remind ourselves that the day that we still have food, we are lucky. Of course, in the monastic tradition, we have our begging bowl from the time of the Buddha. So that we don't work for money anymore. We depend on the kindness and the gift from the lay friend. In this case, a retreatant, you come. And I remember there's a gatha that say, as long as you have the begging bowl, the Buddha, you will have food. All we need is to concentrate on our practice. And that can be applied for all our lay friends as well, is to pray and to have being grateful to have a decent family, to have a member family in the time of eating together, breaking bread kind, and also to wish other being they can get the chance to have food or water. A couple of times we have electrical down, and we didn't have any water, so we have to carry some water. But there are many people in country when you have to carry water from the well, a few miles before you get the water. And those kind of things, we are very lucky to have it. Just open the tap and you have water. And the same thing, we have some people to cook food for us. So I think children as well as adults, it's always good to be reminded that we are very grateful to have food to eat. Thank you.
Dear Thai, dear community, I'm David, and I want to add one thing to what my brother said. A very simple practice that we did in my family for a number of years was just to sound the bell, to ring the bell before myself and my children and my wife sat down together. And most of the time we did not recite the 5 contemplations, did not pray, but listening to the bell gave us a chance to stop and look at the food, and then we were eating a meal with no other distractions, no phones next to people, no computers. So I think when we can or have that motivation to recite, whether it's the contemplations or something from another tradition, that's wonderful. Sometimes that may not always fit in our particular family. A bell is also, to me, a very practical and a wonderful tool. So there's a question there: how do we teach motivation for self-care? And I'm going to take it as having 2 aspects: our own motivation to take better care of ourselves, and how might we help another person, whether that person is a client or a friend. But the word that catches me there is motivation. So it's not the way I heard the question. It's not so much what are the techniques, what do we do? We've been talking about that, mindfulness or resting or eating properly, but motivation. So, well, you know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. I heard that a lot as a child. Never been around horses, but I kind of got the idea. So what I actually believe is that awareness or mindfulness is essential. For example, if it's myself or someone I work with, I'm a social worker, or really someone I supervise, if we're struggling around something where we agree that it needs to be done, it's helpful to actually be aware of the benefits, for example, of not sleeping enough, the benefits of not eating properly, the benefits of always feeling a little bit rushed, overwhelmed. And it may sound like I'm being sarcastic, but I'm not. There is some reason, and whether the reason is habit energy, whether it's a sense of obligation, whether there is a certain satisfaction, it fits with my self-image. You know, I work really hard. Sometimes what's going to be revealed is I may work hard, but I really don't work very efficiently or effectively. So encouragement is very helpful, but I think sometimes, and I know for myself, I don't take well to suggestions. You know, it's a weakness, but I really don't. So it is helpful for me, and has been, to take a look at what's really happening. Can we be mindful when we first wake up in the morning? Even slow down, for example, lie in bed and do breath awareness or body awareness for a minute or two. See what state of mind we start the day with. And I think that our mindfulness practice fits pretty well with some of the things out there in the helping professions related to what's sometimes called stages of change and motivational interviewing, and it's very, you know, simple. There are times where we're really ready to do something. I imagine many of us in this room, we've made a positive change. We began exercising, or we gave up smoking, and it was not much of a struggle, or it wasn't, because we were just ready. Why were we just ready? Well, there's a mystery to that, but there's, you know, a whole set of causes and a history. And sometimes it's a big struggle. My belief is it's not helpful to put a lot of mental energy into things that we know we're not going to change at that moment. I mean, you can entertain or bore yourself or your friends explaining about your addiction to coffee, or you're this or you're that, or staying up too late, which is pretty common, actually. Common among most parents, and then they wonder why their teenagers or children don't sleep enough either. Train themselves, should know better, but train themselves to be addicted to, you know, whether it's a smartphone or a computer, and then ponder what's wrong with the young people. But leaving that aside, it's helpful sometimes actually to say, all right, this is the way it is right now, and let me just see if I can look into it a little more. So I haven't given a real, I've covered one side of it, which is when we're knowing something's not working, or someone else, again, a client, a worker, a colleague, or one of our Sangha friends. We know it's not working, but we don't see quite yet the energy for change. And there may be other folks on the panel who want to address, you know, when the motivation is really there, or when it's even lower than what I've said. But it is mindfulness first. And mindfulness, to me, mindfulness, the beginning, the middle, and the end, and then you know, many other things that we bring into taking care of ourselves.
Dear Ty, dear friends, I'm going to touch on a number of these questions at the same time. I want to share my family's meal practice. In my core family, there's one person who's a non-spiritual agnostic, one person's a spiritually seeking agnostic, one person who's a spiritual non-Catholic, and one Christian Buddhist, or Buddhist Christian. So finding a is not necessarily an easy thing to do, whether it's, if we want to call it praying, for instance, that would be a problem for our non-spiritual agnostic. So for a long time, my wife and I, we would, at the beginning of meals, we would say 5 things we were grateful for. Each of us would take a turn doing that. And, that's a chance to touch the blessings that we've had that day. When my children were born, then we continued with that with them. When they were young, they only had to do 3, but then as they got older, they did 5 too. And you could do more. At one point, my wife suggested that we take 3 breaths after we go around the room and everyone says what they're thankful for. And so we started doing that practice also. My wife is not the Buddhist. And at that point, there was definitely if I would have suggested taking 3 breaths after we said what I was grateful for, it would not have worked. So I think that also touches on when the conditions are right, when the opportunities come up, appreciating what we have, but also always having our senses open and our awareness there for other possibilities that might be available, ripe. Maybe it's the right time. After I came back from one retreat, then I suggested that we would have 5 minutes of mindful eating, silent eating after our 3 breaths. And then one of the kids could ring the bell. And then we could talk. And so the first time we did this, my daughter said in her gratitudes she was grateful our family was becoming more spiritual. And when we rang the bell, my son said, if we keep adding these rituals, we're never going to get done eating. I pointed out that we were eating for part of that in this new ritual, but it definitely gave a different flavor gives a different flavor to the meal, a different atmosphere to the meal, and we really do try to eat our meals together. When everyone was living at home, we always tried to eat together, which I think is very important, and I think there's lots of studies that show that, and also there's very interesting studies on how writing down or speaking 5 things we're grateful for each day can have multiple benefits, multiple positive benefits that people who, when they randomize people to listing 5 things they're grateful for, 5 things they were annoyed by, and 5 neutral things that happened in the day, they saw very different results in those 3 groups. And many benefits of the grateful people being more happy, and also everyone around them noticing that they had shifted towards more happiness. So it kind of touches on bliss and the connection of gratitude and bliss, and also enlightenment. I think Ty talks about enlightenment's understanding. It doesn't have to be some, lightning bolt from the sky. And usually it isn't. And I think this also touches on self-care practices, because those mealtime practices are part of my self-care. And like I've said during this retreat, I experiment. I'm a researcher, so I experiment on myself. And at one point I said, okay, what happens if when I come home from work, I'll go upstairs and lie on the bed and do deep relaxation. Listen to Sister Chan Kong's short guided deep relaxation. I'll set my timer for 20 minutes, so if I fall asleep, I'll be able to wake up. And I told my wife this, and so she agreed, because I know that if I just go upstairs and get involved in the family, then the deep relaxation time won't stop. It won't happen. I'll get too busy with that. Or a sitting time is other things I've done. Is when I come home, I'll have her sit for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever I feel like I need at that time. And that's very, very helpful because at the end of a long day at work, in the medical office, I often feel very drained. And I need to kind of recharge myself to be there for my family. We don't have a list compiled. I realized that we did put together a handout for some days of mindfulness we did at 2 hospitals in New York, and maybe that could be something that could be distributed through an email list. It has books, practices, suggestions, so forth. It was geared towards people who are not in the mindfulness tradition, physicians and workers at the hospital, but I think there's something there for everyone. I think there are also other books. I think Ty has Pieces Every Step, Pieces Every Breath. Is that the new one? Both, yeah. Yeah, so those are 2 books that really talk about little habits we can start to work on incorporating into our lives. And one person told me they just throw a whole bunch of habits against the wall and they see what sticks. For me, it's better if I choose something 3 weeks or next month. And at the end of that time, I'll think, okay, how did I do? How did I develop this habit very well? And what was the effect? And if it's something beneficial, then I'll say, okay, I'll work on continuing this. And then I'll think of some other habit to try, beneficial habit. Teaching motivation for self-care. I don't know how to do that. I do know from my own experience and also from studies as well that how we address a person makes a huge difference in whether they'll listen to us or not. If you take the judgmental attitude, you need to be exercising more, you need to be eating right, you need to stop smoking. You know how doctors are good at that. It's not going to get any further than, it won't even get any further than like about 2 inches past your lips. I don't even think it makes it to their ears, to someone's ears. But on the other hand, if you speak, if you're coming from a place of compassion, in my experience, and also, like I said, research has shown this, that it makes a huge difference. Say, I'm really concerned. I'm really concerned about your health, about your blood pressure, and if you can, I think if you could just walk, maybe go for a walk each day, something that kind of fits in with your life. Can you think of anything? And this kind of connective speaking, it's not about me saying, wagging my finger. It's about me saying, I really care about you. And then there's also an aspect to it of non-attachment to outcomes. And because if I'm attached to the outcome, if he doesn't do what I want, you can imagine what the dynamic is going to be. And also, I think the other thing I would say is looking for what a person's needs are. How can I, if you've told someone, I wish you'd take out the trash, or I wish you'd do this, why don't you do this, this ongoing thing, or why don't you fix this thing that's broken at home? You've already told them. You know how many times you've told them. You may even tell them how many times you've told them. Every time you tell them again. And it doesn't get done. So, if that's not working, well, there you go. However, if you find a way to praise what they do, what they actually do for you, how they help, look for positive things, some way to help them to feel appreciated, that other thing may actually get done in record time that you weren't even expecting, and you don't even have to mention it again. Again, the non-attachment to outcomes is an important part of the puzzle. Not easy at all. Thank you.
Respected Thầy, dear brothers and dear sisters, I know you're there and I'm very happy. In this moment we have each other. And I would like to answer the question number 5. How can we be mindful during difficult time? How can we be there for ourselves during difficult times? Then the best is to be there for ourselves during non-difficult times. In our daily life, it's not always difficult or unpleasant, or it's not always hectic. How often are we there for ourselves during those moments that are quite neutral or that are quite pleasant if we are aware? So just in this moment as I'm sharing, you can be there for yourself by anchoring your mind in the breathing. In breath, know that it's an in-breath. Out breath, know that it's an out breath. You can be aware of the rise and the fall of your abdomen. You can be aware of how your back is. Is it comfortable or is it painful? Is it upright or is it crouching? Just scan through the body again and again throughout the day, anytime, anywhere. Even when we sit on the toilet stall, we can also be mindful, and it can also be like you are in the meditation hall, the way you sit stably and beautifully on the toilet. That can have a lot of dignity and a lot of love for one's body. And when we are able to be there for ourselves, for our breathing, for our body, for the steps, we learn a lot about ourselves. How we hold tension. Just even a word, now if I say a harsh word or a word that provokes some feeling, suddenly from a state of relaxation, you can go into a state of tension immediately. So get to know how your body feels usually, how it feels when you're relaxed, if you're ever relaxed at all. And through our body, from the top of our head, slowly down the forehead to see if you have any, if you are frowning right now or is relaxed right now. Scan through our face, feel the facial muscles, if they are relaxed or not. Just have a gentle smile that can help us relax the whole body. And just scan through the shoulders, the arms, relax the fingers, wiggle the fingers a little bit, open our chest, sit upright. That helps not only the body to be stable, but also the mind to be stable. Relax the lower parts of the body, wiggle the toes. Say, dear toes, I know you are there and I'm very happy. So if throughout the day we learn to come back to our body and to be more aware of our body, we'll know what kind of state of mind we're in. Because if there's anger, the body will change. If there's sadness, the body will respond to that sadness and will manifest that sadness through the way we sit, the way we speak, the way we hold our body. So an emotion is like a wave. Emotion or a difficult situation is the peak of the wave. And in that moment, it can be very overwhelming. Or sometimes we only see the situation or the emotion after it has already passed. Like we have already screamed or thrown something at somebody or at the wall. So that's the aftermath of it. But we know that an emotion or, a cancer, a tumor, does not start at the peak, right? But it has worked its way up since way before that, when it was underneath the surface of the water. It had a momentum, and it has been going for a long while. When we learn to be more and more aware of our body in our daily life, we are more and more aware of the wave that is working up its way into this, tsunami of emotion or of an illness or of a situation. We will be more aware. So, as practitioners, we are like surfers, surfing on the wave backward. We suffer, but we may not be aware that we suffer. So slowly we learn to recognize, I have a lot of tension in my body, or my chest feels very hot, after I scream. I have indigestion each time I go to Thai restaurant. Yeah? We start to notice things afterwards, the aftermath. That's really good. That's awareness right there. And you surf backward on the wave until when you're angry, you know you're angry. In that moment, you know if you're saying things out of anger and not out of clarity or love, or you're saying things because there were many things that had been hidden before, and now they're just coming out. And this event itself is not really the main event. It's just triggering many things that have been boiling inside of you. So that's awareness right there. So we surf backward on the wave until just a thought or a smell or a taste or a word, or a gesture of our own body, of somebody's body, we recognize, it's causing me, to tense up. It's causing me to feel this heaviness. So you are aware immediately, and you come back to smiling to that, relaxing the body, just coming back, letting go the situation outside. Just come back and breathe with that emotion, with that feeling, with that tension that is there in the moment. And this can be very protective as physicians, as social workers, therapists, teachers, parents. Mindfulness has the capacity to protect us. When we are exposed to so many emotions that come from other people when they share to us about their suffering, and we are not aware of our own bodily reactions, we are actually feeling and inculcating the tension, the emotion of the other person into our own body. That person is crying. It's like you watch a movie, right? A very violent movie, and you're cringing, and your heart is beating fast. You are living the experience of the other person. And imagine, as a psychotherapist, as a social worker, and you go through that stress response, patient after patient, day after day, on top of your own life's dramas. Imagine how much stress and tension we carry. And that's why most of us, when we arrive at the monastery, we're exhausted. We just want to sleep. We're so tired. It's because we carry so much day after day. So awareness of our own body helps us to relax the tension that comes from within. And it also helps us to relax the tension that comes from another person, and to remain calm and spacious, and to recognize this is coming from my patient, from my child. And I'm going to breathe and relax that. And in the presence of that stability and spaciousness, we help our patient. We help the person in front of us to also relax and calm down. You see how children, when they are here, they're much calmer. Parents are very surprised. But, scientists, they learn about the mirror neuron in animals. We know we have that. We feel the feelings of others. We experience physiologically the feelings of others. So if we are aware, then we can protect ourselves. There's still empathy. There's still this utmost attention. And yet we don't have to go through that stress response with that person. Otherwise, somebody is sharing with you about a difficult experience. You're reliving your own trauma, right? Because it triggers something. Then you are reacting to that memory. So you're not really there for the patient, because you are lost in your own thoughts and feelings, dramas, or maybe even solutions. You try to help the other person. So you're not really there. So awareness helps us to truly be there for ourselves and for others. And when we can do that in our daily life, then we can do that when difficult time arises, because it's just a continuum. Thank you, dear ones.
So we still have the question from our dear Mr. Aware of My Confusion, who is a freshman in college. I remember that to be a very confusing time, but I know that Brother Now may be our best opportunity for sharing a bit about beginning to get in touch with what is nourishing and helping one to be on a path. I think that what I can just say, as Brother Now is breathing, that my experience was that it wasn't an individual matter, that it wasn't only from my own gradual awakening within myself, but also I had friends along the path. So I bow to you, our dear brother.
So, dear respected Thai, dear family, yeah, I could be called Mr. Confusion right now, but no. It's a really good question, I think. I feel like we always hear these terms, enlightenment or bliss, and personally, I don't know what enlightenment is. I don't think there's a clear definition of exactly what enlightenment is. And my view of bliss is my bliss might not be your bliss. So, I feel for me to find my bliss is to involve myself in things I enjoy to do things that cultivate the wholesome and the beneficial seeds in me, and try my best to not cultivate the negative and unwholesome seeds in me. It is very difficult in society, especially for me being pretty young, to stay away from all the unwholesome things that are thrown at us every day. I mean, it's very hard for me not to go on Facebook. And when you go on Facebook, there's all sorts of things that you kind of scroll down the news feed and you're like, I don't need to see any of this. So now to try to water the wholesome seeds in me, but still stay connected to those people I care about, who my only connection right now with them is through Facebook. What I try to do, I'm still not 100% at it, is log on, see if I have any messages, notifications that are important, and log off. And I also enjoy getting outside as much as possible, doing things that nourish that happiness inside of me. Being with the kids here, being with the teenagers. I am actually feeling kind of tired today, and I looked up, and I'm very aware of my surroundings, so I know there's someone walking on the path right over there right now, and I saw someone move out of the corner of my eye. I looked over, I said, oh, that person looks familiar. Oh, that family looks familiar. And then I looked up and I saw a family that comes here quite often come in the door, and it nourished this energy in me. And I was able to, at that moment, and still knowing that they're here now, nourish a sense of bliss inside of me. Now, on the other hand, we have the word enlightenment. Now, for me, I try to lean towards the fact of stop trying to find enlightenment, because the more I've noticed for myself, when I feel like, okay, I need to do all these things, I need to practice to become enlightened, I feel kind of, eventually, at first I have a lot of energy, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to become enlightened. And then, as time goes by, I'm like, well, I'm not enlightened yet. Why is it taking so long? Why is this so difficult? But then I realized that there's so many moments that I have insights, I have these things of, oh wow, I'm seeing things very clearly in a very, maybe not a normal way, say, for me. And I'm like, well, that's enlightenment. It's being able to react in a way that's very beneficial to me, or very true to that moment right there. So I tend to see that, enlightenment is in me. Whether or not in that moment I'm enlightened is a different story. So if we keep, for me at least, if I keep going on and going, okay, well, I have to do this to get to there, I'm already losing the fact of I could have enlightenment right now, but I'm so worried about point B that point A, where I am right now, is overlooked. And yeah, no, thinking about it right now in my mind, I'm like, oh wow, that sounds enlightened. But then again, you know, I'm just another person in this room. So each one, like my view is, each one of you came here for a reason, a thought process in your head, so to say. That thought process, in my eyes, is enlightenment. Telling you you need to, or you should go somewhere. I shouldn't say need to, because in reality, we don't need to do anything but drink water and eat food. But you should come here to better yourself. Knowing that already is enlightenment. So, yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Thank you.
So, as a moderator here, I'm aware that my vision is a little bit difficult at this distance, and the actual word that was on the question was bliss, and then finding my road to right livelihood. So that's okay, because a good question actually can be answered. And I really, in so many ways, and we can hear the answer even in another person's question, even if it wasn't asked. So that I think if we listen carefully to what Brother Now was saying, that also applies to the path to right livelihood, to be present in the now, to be able to appreciate the elements that have gotten us here right now and what we're watering. If we begin to follow that, you know, that kind of unfolding happens very naturally. But I think there's a real gradual trust and friends along the path that begin to come about. I can also share for our young freshmen from college that there's something called Wake Up. You can find it. There's information in the back of the hall and in the dining hall about Wake Up. It's a wonderful way to be supported and being surrounded by friends that are also asking these wonderful questions that you asked, but a much larger question as well. You will find some mutual friends there that can also be of support and practice. So I hope that was a benefit to you, dear friend, and that has helped to remind you of your awareness of your confusion is actually quite of great benefit. So we have time for a few more questions. So I'm wondering if there are other questions that want to arise. If so, can we have folks at the microphone in the back, and then we'll go with the retreatants first. Okay, dear little brother. Thank you for your wonderful enthusiasm. We are so happy you're here. So maybe we'll take 3 more questions so that it gives us time for answering.
Dear Sangha, dear brothers and sisters, I was not at the retreat, but I am a helper also. I work with teenagers who have autism, who are behaviorally challenged, and I find myself in situations where I have to be present and be mindful in moments of aggression. So I'm wondering, how can I better use mindfulness and awareness to be there for the people I'm trying to help in their moments of extreme crisis, where I have to also maintain my own personal safety and maintain theirs. Thank you.
So the question is how to maintain mindfulness in the face of personal threat, or also helping to support families that might be in a situation such as in a personal safety for families maybe with a child or a family member with autism. Okay, thank you.
Dear Ty, dear Sangha, I also apologize. I was not at the retreat this week, but I know one of the main philosophies of the practice is impermanence and dealing with attachment. So I was wondering how you recommend we deal with attachment, because I know as a teenage girl that's a very difficult feat for someone like me. So thank you.
So the question is about impermanence and dealing with attachment.
Dear Thai, dear Sangha, so this is a little bit of a rhetorical question, something that I've been struggling with lately. It's a combination of approaching or in midlife, my experience in advocating for others in their healthcare circumstances, and it raising a lot of fear in me. I'm very aware of the teachings of the Four Noble Truths, and life is suffering. But it's amazing, as much as I'm really learning to savor life and all that it has to offer, I can't help but not have it elicit such a fear in me, sorry to be pessimistic, but that it's all downhill. And that, savor the fact that I have my taste, because that might be gone, or to be able to walk the trails because I might not be able to do that again. And that fear of being at that junction where I don't know if I have 5 more good years, 10, 20. I'm not one of those people who wants to have a bucket list and have to feel that I have to check it off to feel like I did it. I actually don't feel like I need to do another thing in this life. But I also don't want to be wasteful with my life either. So when we talk about aimlessness, I could spend an entire day with my cats and be happy. But then, am I being wasteful with my time? Because I'm now aware that I may not have many more of these functional opportunities to do things. So I struggle with that balance, and I was hoping maybe you could share some insight. Thank you.
The near enemies of aimlessness and the discernment with when we are, she used the word wasteful with our time and energy. And also she was asking about impermanence and fear, which seems to also connect in a bit with our last question as well. So I think we have our 3 questions there. I think that's quite rich. The second question was about attachment, and she also mentioned about impermanence, but attachment was the main theme.
Respected Thầy, dear family, dear Nora, I know you're there and I'm very happy. Nora's mother, Heather, emailed and asked, since the young people know that some of us monastics are moving to another monastery, can they come to say goodbye? And I said, yes, we may be a bit busy today on the last day of the retreat, but please come. So I'm sure we're also practicing the awareness of impermanence. Hi, Josh. Glad you can come. Bye, my dear. Take good care of each other. Kyra and I, and also Shoshana, were classmates since 1993 at UCSF School of Medicine. So it's been over 21 years now. And I hadn't seen her for at least 10 years. And hadn't seen Shoshana for 16 years. So it's really nice that I have my friends here with me during this retreat. And I think in our lives we learn to live most beautifully in our daily life, in our thoughts, speech, and bodily actions. We strive towards peace, harmony, stability in our body, in our own body, and our own mind, and with others. And so, to me, that's the best way to address impermanence. We cannot always be together, however we may love each other. But when we are together, we take good care of each other through our karmas of thoughts, bodily actions, and speech, so that these moments are beautiful as we are capable of generating. When I think of you, I know that's what you're doing. And you know that I also continue to live my life as beautifully, as peacefully as possible. And that knowing connects us very deeply. It gives us faith. So when we're together, we're not strangers to each other. How often when you are with somebody you love, and yet you're not really there. So you're strangers if you're not really there. But if we live our life beautifully, even when we are apart, we're not at all estranged. We're not at all separated, because we know for many, many years. But seeing them, it took only one instant to connect. And we know that we're very much together all of these years in our aspirations, in our love, in our deep intention. And it also helps us to address the attachment too. Often we are attached to bodily forms. But even if we look deeply into our body, the body is never the same way, right? Some hair has already fallen today, some cells have sloughed off today. New cells have been generated, regenerated. Maybe we have another aged spot on our hand or on our face today. So if we recognize that the body is always in this constant flux, and we hold that dearly, not rejecting it, but hold it dearly. I often look at my hands these days, and I'm very aware of how they look. And I'm so thankful to my hands. And I scan through my body, and very often I say to myself, I love you so. I love you so. Thank you for having the capacity. That way, even if you don't have a perfect body, if you don't have a perfect health, of what is still there. What is still there. That's a great gratitude that we can give rise to. And when we can cherish deeply what we have in this moment, and we don't take it for granted, when it's no longer there, we will not regret. When somebody dies, when somebody goes away, when somebody disappears from our life, often we feel the pain of pain, the regret, partly because that person is no longer there, or our youth or our health is no longer there. That's partly true. But mostly it's because we have not been there to cherish that person. We have not been there to cherish what we have been endowed with. We have neglected, we have forsaken ourselves and each other, and that's why the pain arises so deeply. So to be there and cherish what is helps us to loosen that grip of attachment, and helps us to loosen that fear. When I was working in the hospital, and either they were cursing at the doctors and the nurses, or they would not eat. They would be so depressed. They would be lying in bed and looking out, waiting for somebody to come. And very often nobody would come, because in their lives they didn't care. They didn't take care of themselves, of their families. Maybe they were very rich, very successful, very ambitious, but the things that were real to them, they weren't taking care of. The unfinished business, they weren't addressing. So in those moments, their loved ones couldn't be there for them because they hadn't been there for their loved ones. And then the things that they hadn't taken care of, the emotions, would arise so strongly, and they would be so scared. And one can be so scared until the very last breath. So when we touch this deep fear of death, we have to ask ourselves, am I living my life? Have I been living my life? That fear helps us to come back and ask the real question. Just like when you have a pain, from a cut, that pain lets you know that there's a cut. So you address that cut. So that pain is only a manifestation of something so much deeper that you need to address. And when we learn to practice in our daily life, to just sit quietly 10 minutes a day before we start the day or before we go to sleep, to be in touch with the body, to be in touch with what is. We practice being there for ourselves, not being neglectful of what's real in us. And we take care of that little by little, one issue at a time. Then we will not regret if suddenly we are in an accident suddenly we will not regret. And it's just as important for our loved ones as well. For me, I learned to not fear death, partly from my grandmother. My grandmother had never gone to school for even a day. She learned to spell, to read from her own son. But she had a spiritual life. When she had time, not having to cook for us and to do things for us, she would sit quietly on the plank bed and do her rosary, or just sit quietly, just like that. But years when I was living in the US and I had so much, sadness and difficulty, I just remembered her. And the image of her sitting so stably on the plank bed calmed me. And when she died, I wasn't there. But I heard that she was able to tell her children to wash her, to change her into new clothes, to stand around her. And she asked the 2 monks that she loved and took very good care of to stand by her and pray for her. And as she was bringing her hands together into a lotus bud, she passed away, just midway like this, and she died. And when I heard that, I felt so deeply inspired by my grandmother, who had no diploma, who had no degree, and yet she lived such a beautiful life, and she died so beautifully that gave me this non-fear towards death. And in the daily life, especially for all those of us who are physicians, those of us who work with patients who are dying, do our best to live our lives with dignity, with beauty, so that we can help those people to touch that in themselves. Help them, ask them questions like, what are the most beautiful moments of your lives? What are you grateful for? Yeah. What would you want to say to your loved ones in this moment? So you can only give what you have. And what you practice in your daily life, you will transmit that. And to be able to help somebody to die with dignity, or to witness somebody who dies with dignity, with beauty, that nourishes us so much, that infuses us with non-fear. Because very often when we see somebody dies, when we work in the hospital, you see that people die in oblivion. They are under the influence of morphine. They don't know what's going on at all. They just drift into oblivion. Or they die in agony, in extreme anger, or extreme sadness. And that affects our consciousness as well. That will also water death. So we ask ourselves, am I living my day? I think, yesterday I gave a consultation to a friend and I asked her, have you forgotten that you have a choice? You can be a doctor, you can be so successful, and yet you feel so pushed to work, to take on patients, to have no time for yourself, to even eat, to have no time for your children who are growing up right in front of your eyes, who have no time for anything, for your marriage. Very often, we forget that we have that choice, that you can say no, that you can go the middle way and not the extreme. Either I have this job and do everything, or I quit. But if I quit, what will happen to me? So we learn to go the middle way, to assert these needs, these things that are very important to us, and to take care of them in our daily lives. Then that is living impermanence and celebrating impermanence, not being afraid of it, but really know that the children will grow in a year or two. They will not be there for us. Do we want to just be engrossed in our work only, be lost in that, and then losing our children as well, or losing our marriage as well? So when we are aware of impermanence, actually we learn to cherish what we have right now in our health, in our age, in our family. Thank you, dear ones.
So I'm wondering if my brother David might address, and both of you can do it, because I have two brother Davids sitting next to each other. I think they did that on purpose so they can look to the other. Maybe address the question that our sister had regarding personal safety in a professional situation, as well as me.
Dear Ty, dear friends, I think for me, this is also touching on the one about difficult times. And it's, so I think one thing is that practicing in less difficult times helps us to strengthen our mindfulness muscles for the difficult times. So my experience is you can't just pull mindfulness out of a bag and expect it to be this force that you can move buildings with and lift 150 pounds. You have to start with the easy things, lifting a cup of tea. So I think that daily practice, formal, informal, is really critical in helping us to be able to handle the difficult times. And being present when things difficult is also a big challenge and takes practice. It's very interesting how awareness of a situation is different than being in this situation. There's a situation in my own life where I was in Brazil. I suddenly felt very much endangered. And I was just having that fight or flight response in my body. And kind of trying to figure out what to do. And then I realized brought my attention to my breathing. And the situation changed for me immediately because I became aware of the fear and everything that was going on in my body, and I immediately shifted from that fight or flight, wild animal feeling to a feeling of extreme clarity in what was going on. There was still certainly an awareness that this was not a good situation, but again, it was shifting from a being embroiled in it to an awareness that this is what's going on right now. And I don't know how to, I don't have a magic bullet to do that, but it had to do with, again, what's going on right now, bringing myself back to my breath. Not in a, I'm going to breathe deep and get calm way. It was about, okay, what's my breath doing? In the same way, I think, sometimes we bring ourselves back to our breath in a very focused and intentional way, breathing in, breathing out. But one wonderful piece of advice Lynn Fine, one of my teachers, gave me once was, see about just bringing your breath back, bringing your attention back to your breath in a very quiet way in the background during the course of the day. And it was an amazing transformation I felt so much more joy in just this kind of quiet, like, okay, I'm breathing. And in that same way, that awareness, I recall another time where I was, my goodness, I thought my life was over. Not in a violent way, but in just a multiple things happening way. And I brought my awareness back to my breath, and there just became this awareness of feeling this great sadness, this great stress, this great pain. But then there was suddenly this like very curious, interesting, wonderful joy that was also present, because I realized that I needed to be alive to feel this, and that I was alive at that moment. And with that came this very deep understanding that this is going to pass. This is impermanent. It's very easy to think about these things intellectually, but to get them in here is another level that I'm always grateful for when it happens. But I realize that I need to be alive to feel this. And this is going to pass, and I have an opportunity to learn something from it. Those violent, I have sometimes come up in my own, I work in the Bronx, and sometimes things come up where it's concerning, I'll say. And again, I think it's about doing my best, which isn't always perfect, rarely ever, never perfect, but doing my best to bring myself back to my breathing, be aware of my breathing. And that helps things to be more clear so I can think, okay, what's going on here? Trying to know, prior to the situation arising, if I can know the person better and be more aware of kind of their state and what may be clues that I can't even verbalize may give me some clues to, okay, now I need to call security, or no, I can, if I can stay calm. We also have all these neurons in our brain called the mirror neurons, which is what allows us to be in sync with somebody when they're happy, when they're sad, when they're angry. When someone walks in the room and they're very angry, and you're automatically kind of, your mood will shift too, the room and the feeling in the room shifts. And so that's another way that, and it's not just about you syncing with that other person, but also by your own self being calm, being centered, that can also carry over to the other person as well. One last thing. In difficult times and so forth, one thing, also another time when I was going through a very, very difficult time in my life, and I woke up and I thought, this is just an adventure. This is just an adventure. What's, and I realized that if it's just an adventure, I can be this bodhisattva superhero also. And so by kind of viewing it as this adventure, and it really helped to kind of give me a little bit of space, and also gave me smiles when I would think about, okay, what would the bodhisattva superhero do in this situation? So I hope some of these things will be helpful for you, and thank you very much.
Respected Thầy, dear Noble community, so we ended the session of questions and answers, and we would like to take out some time for you to be able to share your own insights, your experience of this retreat. We have a moment to do this so that we have some sorts of conclusion. Okay? So please take your time to do that. You can use the microphone there, or we can pass the microphone to you. Some of you, this is the first time you come to our monastery or our practice tradition, and some of you have been here before, but how it has affected you, some insights that you have arrived at about your work, about your life, some transformation that you may have experienced, some concerns you have, please share with the community so that we can all be aware and be nourished by that. Thank you.